Hello folks, I'm Alex, this is Alex Unabridged, and these are my thoughts on Bookshops and Bonedust. So welcome back to the channel if that is the case. Yes, I'm going to have a little chat today about my thoughts on Bookshops and Bonedust by Travis Baldree, which is of course the prequel essentially to Legends and Lattes, which I read earlier this year. Bookshops and Bonedust came out in November, so we're just into December now. So it's actually one I've managed to read pretty quickly after release, or at least listen to. I had it as an audiobook, which is narrated by Travis Baldree. So yes, let's have a little chat about what I thought about it. Did it live up to my expectations after loving Legends and Lattes? So what is this one about then? This one is set 20 years prior to the events of Legends and Lattes. Legends and Lattes, we meet Viv at the end of her career as a mercenary orc warrior, and this one she's early career days. So she's running with a crew, a legendary crew called Rackham's Ravens. So she's quite early on in her career with them. They're tracking a powerful necromancer called Vereen, and during a battle with Vereen's undead minions, Viv sustains quite a bad injury to her leg. So she's unable to carry on with her crew until her leg heals, and so they drop her off in this sleepy seaside town called Merk, promising to pick her up on the way back through once she's healed up well. So Viv's stuck in this little town, bored out of her mind, frustrated at not being able to be out there, you know, kind of fighting, doing the warrior thing, and a little concerned that she's kind of blown it, that Rackham's Ravens won't actually come back to pick her up. She's going stir crazy in her room at the inn, so she decides to go and have a little wander around the town, a very slow wander with a crutch, to see what's there. And she happens across a somewhat dilapidated bookshop, where she meets the owner, Fern, who is a ratkin, sort of a small rat mouse-like creature. And Fern kind of foists a book on Viv, an adventure book. So reluctantly, Viv takes it, and Fern tells her to come back when she's read it and discuss it. So Viv takes it away, and seeing as she's got absolutely nothing else to do, she begrudgingly kind of starts this book and finds that she really enjoys the reading experience, and so goes back to the bookshop. Fern gives her something else, this time a bit of a spicy romance, and so begins this friendship between Viv and Fern over love of a good book, and also Viv's kind of new ideas and enthusiasms as a reader kind of push Fern to do something with the shop and turn it from this sort of tatty old musty place into a kind of a bustling hive of the community. So how does this measure up then against Legends and Lattes? Very well, I would say, extremely well. It has a lot of the same kind of charms, elements, etc. in it that made me love the first one. So this, as I say, this is a prequel, but I think you do need to have read Legends and Lattes first before reading Bookshops and Bonedust, because it is there are references or things that you will kind of want to know from Legends and Lattes before you go into this. As I say, the things that made Legends and Lattes so wonderful are all here at play in this in Bookshops and Bonedust. Things like characters. The characters are all extremely memorable, extremely well formed. They've all got very distinct personalities. We're seeing a different side of Viv in this. We're seeing, you know, the younger Viv, 20 years younger, a much more kind of ambitious and impulsive in some respects character. But as you go through it, you're starting to see how we get to the genesis of the Viv that we get to 20 years later in Legends and Lartade. The impact that the other side characters, I call them side characters, they're not. I would say this is an ensemble of characters. Viv is the protagonist, this is told through Viv's perspective, but it's very much an ensemble cast of characters, if you like. There's a couple that are much more minor characters, but each character brings something to the story and brings something that changes Viv as a person, that has an impact on her and the others as well. It's a community. So from you've got a different sort of Viv, but you are seeing the beginning of Viv's character arc through to the Viv that we get to. But then we've got, they're all different, the characters. So you've got Fern, the ratkin who owns the bookshop. Fern is, extremely knowledgeable about books, can kind of really good at recommending books for people, and, quite worrisome as well, quite anxious about the business and the fact that, the business is struggling when we first meet Fern in the bookshop. Fern swears a hell of a lot. There is a lot of F-bombs being dropped by this tiny little character, and it works really well, that actually as well. You've also got Melly, who's the owner of the bakery, and the kind of romantic focus, if you like, for Viv in this. And you've got Galena, who we've kind of had reference to from the first book, who becomes a member of the crew of mercenaries. But in this, he's kind of, floating around the town, kind of waiting, trying to find a crew to join up with. So as I say, it's very much an ensemble cast. There are other characters that come into it that I won't spoil, but it works really well, and they all bounce off each other. They all interact really well. The relationships between them all are interesting. And they all have an impact on each other in some way. It's all kind of about, sort of that learning through relationships, learning through interactions with other people, what's important to you. So yeah, really good character work. I say very, very memorable characters, and there's humour in pretty much every one of them. The setting's really nice, and it really fits as well for the story. So we're in this sleepy little town, Merk. It is a high fantasy setting. It's kind of got the trappings of high fantasy, I think, but as someone who doesn't particularly go in for high fantasy generally, there is enough in it that is very much recognisable to me, as in terms of the real world. So you've got the bookshop, you've got the bakery, you've got other kind of shops, you've got other you've got the pub, all that kind of stuff. But then you've also got other elements coming in with high fantasy stuff. So yeah, it's a really well kind of put together. It has very clear rules about its kind of the magic that is within the story. It doesn't go into major details. It doesn't need to. But there aren't any kind of glaring holes or glaring kind of rule breaking, if you like, based around its world building and its kind of systems. It just works really well. As I say, it's different enough to be interesting, but it's familiar enough to certainly for me to suck me in and make me feel like it's a real place while you're reading it. Story wise, plot wise, you've got kind of two main sort of plots. You've got the bookshop's plot. So that this is the cozy stuff. This is the stuff, the character relationships, Viv discovering a love of reading, a love of books, discovering friendships, relationships, and helping and being part of a community. And then you've got the Bonedust side, which is more of the fantasy hunt for a necromancer, kind of mystery around sort of mysterious dark characters that arrive in the town. That's where the stakes are, I would say. The major stakes of the story are on that kind of more fantasy side. And both work really well together. Both are combined together well, both play off each other really well. It doesn't feel like two distinct storylines. It's paced well, the way that kind of some chapters focus on much more of one story, some chapters focus on much more of another, but you never feel like it's too separated. It works really well together, and it helps with the pacing. The only thing I would say about the pacing is that it's off a little bit in the second half. This is kind of my only sort of criticism of the book overall, really, in terms of, you know, anything that I've got negative to say about it, is that, yeah, the first part, great. The first half of the book, fantastic. Then it just hit kind of a little bit of a lull. Not to the point where I kind of found it boring or lost attention or anything like that, but the first half I'd been very much kind of like I wanted to listen to it at every given opportunity. And then we hit a point in the middle where actually I just felt that drop off a bit. It ramped up again at the end in terms of my interest or my kind of want to listen to it, you know, all the time, towards the end. And I'd say the end and the epilogue are perfect. They're, you know, for me, that they absolutely hit the mark. But yeah, there is a little bit, for me, just a bit of a pacing issue, and that may very well be a personal thing, that, as I say, didn't let it down, so to speak, but was certainly noticeable for me. But writing-wise in general, I really like Travis Baldree's voice, you know, and both in terms of the authorial voice and also the fact that he narrates this as well. And I think, you know, his writing is extremely warm. It's got a really good flow to it. He's got some really beautiful descriptive quality to it as well. And listening to him read it, I think, just highlights that. It's, as I say, the description is great. You can easily picture everything in it. And you can certainly, it's very evocative in terms of the emotions that the characters are feeling, that, you know, things like that. He puts you in it very much so. I get lost in that kind of language. It's quite modern. In fact, it's very modern. Like Legends and Lattes, there is modern slang, there is modern swearing in it, you know, and I like that because, again, I'm not generally great with high fantasy because I find it difficult to kind of put myself in it if it's too different to kind of what I know and to reality and stuff. But this kind of grounds me a bit with it. So I'm all for a bit of modern language. It's extremely funny, similarly to the first one. It's the humour I really like. There's a great sort of range of humour, from kind of silly to sarcastic, and he manages to kind of do the funny and the cosy and the more emotive stuff, I think, you know, equally as well as one of each other, of kind of the elements of it. He yet again made me want to eat all the baked goods ever whenever I read it. So, you know, and that was the same for the Legends and Lattes, was every time I read it, I just wanted baked goods. And this is the same. This is exactly the same, because you've got the baker in this, and it's more baked goods. But yeah, it's extremely funny, and just very charming, extremely charming. And that is what I'd say generally about it. It is an extremely charming book. It is cosy fantasy. It is very cosy. It is just a joy to listen to. It will most definitely be re-listened to, probably multiple times. And yeah, I loved it. Not quite as much as Legends and Lattes, but very, very close. And I think part of that is the fact that Legends and Lattes was a complete shock to me that I liked it at all. You know, because it would not be the sort of thing that I would ordinarily kind of go for. And I only picked it up because I was doing one of my adventures in genre was fantasy that month, back in February. And I thought, well, I'll give it a go. People seem to like it. I'll give it a crack. And loved it. Absolutely loved it. I think I ended up giving that a 5-star. I think I might have given it slightly lower than that to start with, but on reflection and when I was talking about it and stuff, it's like, no, this is a 5-star. This is one of my favourite books of the year, and it still is one of my favourite books of the year. This is still one of my favourite books of the year, but it is just not quite a 5-star for me. I think the pacing issue that I mentioned, I think that is just worth knocking it down half a star. So this is a 4.5 stars. It's still absolutely bloody brilliant. I still love it. I will reread it, and I would recommend it to anyone if you want something lovely and warm and funny and cozy, especially for the winter months. And yeah, as I say, I thoroughly enjoyed it, and I will definitely be, you know, on the lookout for whatever Travis Baldree is doing next. I would like to see him go back to Viv and do more in this world. But at this point, having, you know, read these two and listened to him, and just knowing that I like his writing style a lot, I will pretty much try whatever Travis Baldree writes, I should think. So yes, so there we go, folks. A 4.5 from me. Excellent book. Certainly on my, you know, one of my favourites for the year. So I will end it there for today, folks. Thank you very much for watching, as always. Do let me know your thoughts in the comments. Have you read Bookshops and Bonedust? Did you enjoy it as much as I did, or was it not your cup of tea? If you enjoyed this video, please do consider giving me a like and subscribing for more content coming very soon. But from me, for now, that's ta-ra.